Today, more than 170 million people launch their every thought, from trivial to world-changing, into the Twitter ether.
No matter who they were, no matter whether they had an existing voice or platform, to say what they wanted to say and get it out to a huge amount of people.
I'm using Twitter to set pictures and thoughts from space.
I like to follow my old girl, Martha Stewart.
Twitter completely changed the game when it comes to fueling that appetite for immediacy.
The opportunity to send mass messages in microblog form to anyone interested in logging on to find out what you are doing and thinking right now.
So many moments happened on Twitter.
Damn, Daniel!
Alex from Target.
It truly broke the internet.
Twitter was really a bit of a game changer back then because it was this really unique combination of almost like a blog style interaction. It was this amazing sort of sense of community and socialization.
The platform was actually co-founded. It was with Jack Dorsey, Noah Glass, Biz Stone and Evan Williams while they were at a podcasting company called Odeo. But it launched to the public in July 2006. So the main thing that they really wanted to address with Twitter was immediacy. There wasn't really a platform at the time that had the capacity for real-time, to-the-minute updates that we could get from individuals all around the world. And so they really wanted to address that and create a medium that people could access in the moment, wherever they were, just ready to go.
I guess the difference and the way that you had to be a little bit punchier and more deliberate with what you say is that it had that character limit as well.
With only 140 characters per tweet, people had to be succinct in a way that they really didn't need to prior to that. And it created a limitation that meant that people were a little bit more experimental with how they were dealing with the platform and how they wanted to communicate with everybody. So the first ever tweet was actually in March of 2006. It was Jack Dorsey saying, "Just setting up my Twitter," only Twitter at the time didn't have any vowels, so it was TWTTR.
Back before then, things were just a lot slower and I suppose a bit more deliberate. There was still, and there still is, all of that fact checking, and of course you have to make sure that everything is verified and accurate. But back then just things took a little bit more time. If you're watching television, for example, to get the latest news, you'd have to wait for those news bulletins to air. Twitter came along, you could literally pick up your phone, you could check your phone, and then you'd be able to see what was happening when it came to news.
I think to a degree, Twitter really did have a mobile first approach. And because it really did focus on that immediacy and that real-time updating, people were able to just kind of tap something out, it would go out and it would happen straight away. Whereas on Facebook, for instance, there was still that kind of legacy of I've got to go home and post this folder of 1 million photos of a night out. Whereas Twitter was, it's happening now, it could go to everybody and I'm contributing to this force.
That really became apparent, I think, during the election campaign of former US President Barack Obama. It really felt like back then social media was such an integral part of his campaign, and they used it so deliberately and so well, and it really felt like you were part of this movement of hope and this really kind of grassroots democratization of not just, I guess, the political rhetoric at the time, but also that grassroots kind of community style of social media as well, which was a really exciting thing to witness at that time back in 2008.
I think the impact that Twitter had on news was really interesting, especially as we've seen it grow in the last 20 years, because ultimately it was the home for citizen reporting. It was a place where we would get updates on natural disasters as it was happening from the people who were experiencing it. And it was the place where people could report on global political movements and moments that were happening in a way that was a first-person event. And it meant that not only were people starting to focus more on Twitter as a source of news, but also it meant that people felt like they themselves had a voice to contribute to the conversation in that way.
Often you'd have to wait for affiliates to film that footage and then we'd get it back to our newsroom, and that's how we'd be able to verify it and distribute it. This changed the game. This was a completely different way because we could get that footage as it was happening. And some of the videos, particularly from the Arab Spring back in 2010, were remarkable. And in certain circumstances, we actually wouldn't even be allowed to have journalists and cameras in those areas. Not only are you getting that incredible vision on the ground as it was happening, but you're also getting those extraordinary eyewitness accounts as well from people who were living and breathing those historic moments as they were happening around them.
That's not leadership. You can't govern the nation by tweet.
Twitter really started to gain momentum after it showed at South by Southwest in 2007. That tripled its user base overnight, especially because it did actually win an award at the event. And from there, it started to get a lot more buy-in from higher profile users and celebrities, and wherever the celebrities are, people want to follow. So automatically, it created a much bigger community.
Everything changed once Twitter arrived. It meant that people were able to live tweet what they were watching, what they were feeling, if something was great, if something was terrible, and it meant that word was spreading way faster than ever before. You know, it became this huge shared experience. And for example, in 2019, when the third episode of the final season of Game of Thrones went to air, 7.8 million people were live tweeting as they were watching that episode. I mean, that's unheard of.
Everybody was able to connect with maybe somebody in a different country who was completely in love with the same entertainment that they were and the same pop culture that they were. So it created a language unto itself.
A lot of the film studios and production houses started to realize how quickly they could harness that power of kind of that hive mentality of people on Twitter. So for example, in 2009, Sony Pictures, they created Twitter accounts for a lot of their films, and it meant that they were able to push their new films out into this kind of bigger space rather than using their traditional marketing materials. So the District 9 campaign, for example, that was a huge one for them because it was this huge guerrilla style marketing campaign where they started putting these bus benches saying for humans only, and people would tweet them and question, was this real? People started calling in alien sightings. Then it turned out it was all for this film, and it turned District 9 into a massive box office success.
Especially when it first started, it was a great way of keeping up to date with scores when you didn't have a TV or radio with you, because not only reporters but also sporting organisations would pretty much live tweet games. So every time that there was a try or a goal, they would write down who scored it and then what the actual score was. So if you were out and you had no other way of finding out the scores, it was a great way to keep up to date with what was happening.
I think there's something really wonderful about Twitter in that unless you elected to have a private platform, it was kind of a great equalizer where celebrities, everyday people, journalists were all kind of on the same footing. If you posted, it could go to everybody.
Twitter totally changed the way celebrities and fans interacted. Before, you know, people used to have to get their updates on their favorite celebrities through magazines, through newspapers, and through certain celebrity blogs. But Twitter meant that they could interact with their favorite celebrities in real time and often got big responses. I mean, there's a very famous Twitter exchange between Cher and a Lady Gaga fan at Gaga's Apostle, where they tweeted, "Cher, sit on my face," and Cher replied, "Sit on your own damn face, I'm busy." Quite a few people became famous through Twitter, and a couple of great examples are 2014's Alex from Target. This was a guy who was just doing his job. A photo was posted of him while he was working. He went viral. He became an overnight sensation. He appeared on Ellen, as was The Time. And a similar example is the Damn Daniel videos. These are from 2016. He went viral as well. These videos of Damn Daniel.
Damn Daniel, back at it again with the white van.
And it blew up the internet and created these overnight celebrities.
I think at its peak, Twitter really functioned as a kind of de facto voice of the people, because all of a sudden we were seeing these updates from regular people on the street, not just news platforms, not just celebrities, not people who already had an existing voice or platform. And that made it a lot more accessible for a lot of people, which ultimately meant that the news was found there, the news was growing there, and it became a source as much as it was a kind of community builder.
Nowadays, it's a very different challenge because now there is an oversaturation of footage, of storytelling, and it has become a difficult sort of path to tread, I think, for newsrooms. Obviously, we always make sure that what we're running is verified and accurate, but now it's just that saturation of it as well that you really need to be careful of.
Now I find it's a lot harder to get correct information, and it's not just sport that this is a problem with. There's a lot of fake accounts, there's a lot of accounts that you can't necessarily trust putting out information, so you have to be really careful.
Twitter has created a lasting legacy for itself through the way it changed people's interactions with not only themselves, with their favourite content, but also with celebrities and the news cycle. It genuinely put the power into people's hands. They weren't waiting for a critic to tell them if they should go see a film. They were deciding that for themselves based on what they were seeing everyone else doing. And that's a huge legacy for Twitter.
Look, I think it has certainly evolved, and the X of today is not the Twitter that first started. But I certainly think there is still a place for it, particularly when it comes to that grassroots element of storytelling and sharing that incredible footage from the ground. We recently also saw that a tragic example during the Bondi shooting. I know that a lot of people, when it was first happening, because it was such a developing situation so quickly, a lot of people in the area in particular were going to Twitter to try and get that instant information. However, later on, of course, we're turning to newsrooms to see what the broader picture was. It has a place, I think, certainly, and will always, because it is very much part of the fabric of storytelling now. But the Twitter of today, or the X of today, is certainly not the Twitter that we once saw back in 2008.